This is actually a really fun one for me to introduce folks, because these are two of my favorite people I've had the pleasure of working with, one at Rutgers University and the other at the University of Georgia. The only difference between the two of them at this point is I've had the pleasure of babysitting Andrea's kids, which is not possible yet for Christopher. So with that in mind, I'm going to throw this to you, Andrea. You have the floor. Thank you very much.
Oh, hello, everybody. I'm Andrea Alexander. I am the managing editor of Rutgers Today, which is the Rutgers University News Center in New Jersey. We're at the State University of New Jersey. But I am here today to introduce Christopher Childs. He's a broadcast manager for University of Georgia. And today he's going to be talking about how to create video that will get you on the news. And since our format today is I guess the best way to ask questions is put them in the chat, and then we'll go through them at the end of the presentation. So Christopher, I guess it's all up to you.
Great. Thank you so much. And I appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll get started. I'm going to run through this as quickly as I possibly can. It's a lot of information to take in a short period of time. So as you mentioned, just feel free to drop questions in the chat as we move along, and we'll get to them at the end. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Andrea.
Okay, great.
There we go. And so just a quick overview of what we're going to do. Basically, we're going to detail like how and why you should create videos to send to broadcasters, and how, in effect, that'll help you get more pickups. We'll demystify sort of the needs of multimedia journalists. We'll look at reverse engineering news packages, and we'll examine some multimedia pitches. Now, I'll go into some brief overviews of kind of production aesthetics, editing, shooting. Something to keep in mind, it seems obvious, but never send broadcasters anything you don't want to be on air, because that will be the thing that will be on air. And we'll touch on our new Zoom world, which is kind of a blessing and a curse. The last year has changed things tremendously in terms of how broadcasters are interviewing folks. So we'll dive into that a little bit and look forward. And just keep in mind, this presentation is both for professional videographers and amateurs. If you don't even have any experience with anything other than your iPhone or Android and shooting video, you're fine. This will work just as well for you. And then, of course, we'll wrap up with questions at the end. Next slide, please, Andrea.
Sorry.
So this is a short video. It's about 1.5 minutes, and it'll it's highlights of a lot of the broadcast footage we've gotten in the last fiscal year. And it's very just brief, broad, quick view of some of the video footage, or excuse me, some of the broadcast media pickup that we've got last year.
Researchers at the University of Georgia.
UGA.
University of Georgia.
At the University of Georgia.
Students are taking a giant leap for the University of Georgia.
The University of Georgia is producing face shields through their College of Engineering.
UGA will soon recognize 9 historically Black fraternities and sororities on campus.
The University of Georgia joining the space race. A team of about 40 UGA students made the satellite.
It was aboard a rocket that launched from Virginia Friday. Very impressive stuff.
Dr. Jose Cordero.
Dr. Von Waldner.
Richard Slatcher.
Ted Ross.
Ashley Hannings.
Marshall Shepard.
Letitia Dantas.
Sharmon Osai.
B. Yao He.
Joseph Watson.
Elizabeth Birch. Thank you.
UGA wants to test more people for COVID-19, especially people without any symptoms.
We wanted to put in place something that was effective, using the highest level of testing. Most importantly, we wanted fast turnaround.
President Jerry Moorhead announced $250,000 for 2 emergency funds.
University of Georgia is preparing to celebrate 60 years of progress. It was back in 1961 that the school was desegregated. The university is planning several spring semester events to commemorate that milestone.
The University of Georgia reporting a strong finish to a record fundraising campaign despite the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic.
All right, and you can go to the next slide.
University of Georgia.
Sorry about that.
University of Georgia.
Okay. All right, so why create video? Why should you use your time to create video to really for any purposes in terms of media releases? And I would argue that it increases the odds of pickup of just about any story. If you have a video asset, obviously there's going to be more chances that a broadcaster is going to want to pick it up. most importantly, at least for us here in Athens, we're about 70 miles away from Atlanta, our major media market. And I'm always looking for ways to close the distance and time gap. Traffic's getting worse and worse, and crews, news agencies are less willing to send crews out because even the smallest story can take them a full day to drive here, to shoot, to go back. So really, a lot of this is just kind of closing that distance and time gap. Another important thing is it allows you to control the visual narrative. And, by that, I mean, you're giving them video that you've made, you've created, you're able to present your institution in the best possible light. And then, of course, the video can be used for other purposes, other comms purposes. I think the easiest sort of thing you can do with it is it becomes material that you can use for social media. And of course, it gives you a bargaining chip when you're pitching. If you're just pitching a story, if you're soft pitching a story, you're talking to a journalist one day because they've reached out to you for some other inquiry, you could say, hey, I've got this story and I've got this video, are you interested? So it's always, you've got something in your back pocket, and I think that's super helpful. And then of course, it strengthens your relationships with newsrooms. To me, this is one of the biggest things is I want reporters and producers to see me as an asset to them. Someone that's not just available to connect them with our experts or to give them stories, but to be a tool for them. And it's gotten to the point where with some stations, I have a good enough relationship where they will ask me to shoot footage for them. Hey, we're doing this story. Can you go interview this expert? Send us the video by 5 o'clock. So in some ways, I kind of work as a reporter for some of these stations every now and again. Next slide. Okay, so how do you tell if a written story or a news release warrants video? Kind of the first couple big rules I have personally is, can it be shot and edited in an hour? So 2 hours, can you turn it around that quickly? I think that's a good threshold to kind of consider in terms of how much time and effort you want to put into sort of creating these video packages. I have what I call pause system, which is a quantitative method used for determining whether articles, news releases are good for broadcasts. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide and kind of have more information that sort of details what I'm looking for in each written story. And I won't go through all these, but the general gist is I've assigned kind of point values, 1 to 3, on things that I find are generally helpful and that make the story more attractive to specifically broadcast news. So obviously, we start with, is it breaking news? Is there a really good soundbite? Is the story timely? Is there a subject that's ready and camera ready? And if it's a trend story, does it have stats? Does it have real people experiencing it? And examples of what is driving the trend. So I kind of go through each story and each news release, and I kind of make a tally and have a general idea of how well it's going to perform for any broadcast reporter that comes across my pitch. And then you can go ahead and next slide and kind of give you an idea. So here's the scale. And obviously, we're always going to have stories that aren't going to be great for broadcast. You could have something that rates a 0 on here and you still got to get it out to the news. But at least this gives you an indication of how successful it's going to be and how hard you're going to have to push. It also gives you an idea of like, okay, I need to find more stuff to pitch with this story. And that could be just as simple as, making sure you have an expert and lining up some sort of B-roll, whatever it is. All right, next slide. So in terms of reverse engineering the news, I would say don't ever think this at all. It's very simple. As far as broadcast news, I kind of call this the holy trinity of things that reporters are looking for. Obviously, they need visuals, they need written copy, and they need experts and subjects. And the easiest and the quickest and the simplest way you can line up those 3 things for a journalist, the more success you're going to have. So always think when you're working through a news release or a press release, how many of these things can I provide to a reporter? All right, next slide. So this video will give you kind of an idea of the holy trinity that features all three things. Oh, no sound.
$1 million
There we go.
research and development to be led by the University of Georgia. Because influenza viruses are constantly changing, public health officials have to update the current vaccine each year based on the 3 or 4 strains they predict will be the most prominent in the upcoming flu season. What researchers hope to do is identify multiple weaknesses across multiple flu viruses and create a flu shot that can target those weaknesses over a long period of time.
Well, we'd love for it to be lifetime, but to be realistic, it'll probably be more like a 5 to 10 year period of time. And then you might get a booster again, and that'll last you for another 5 or 10 years. And we hopefully could continue to expand that period of time which you could be protected.
All right, so this was a story we were pitching that featured Dr. Ted Ross, who received an NIH grant. And it was at the time the biggest grant I believe the university had gotten. And so the big push was to get him out there. And the first thing I did was I went into the lab and I shot that footage you saw. And we did an interview, went to the Fox affiliate here and did an on-camera interview. And I literally handed them the video on a thumb drive and said, here you go, please use this, feel free. And they were thrilled, absolutely thrilled. And you'll see if you look back at that video, it's not really even color corrected. I white balanced it, but I didn't do a lot of time. I didn't spend a lot of time in post. I literally gave them about a minute to 2 minute reel and they could choose whatever shots that they wanted. Now, moving on to the thing that I would express in terms of knowing your local broadcast is that they're all very different. We like to lump them together and think of them the same, but it's not true, certainly at least for the Atlanta market. We've got 4 major stations and they all 4 have different aesthetics. So I would encourage you to critically examine the visual aesthetics of your local stations and specifically how they shoot video. So do they use lots of zooms? Do they have lots of quick camera cuts, or is there a lack of? Each station generally in any given market is trying to brand and identify themselves in some sort of way visually. So think about how they're integrating B-roll. Think about how their camera work differs. Is it more on site? Is it more in studio? Do they do more live? Do they do more tape? And usually you'll have at least 1 station or 2 in each market that focuses on kind of quote hard news. So keep that in mind as well. We kind of have a balance of that. We have one that's definitely hard news and we have one that I would call more happy talk all the time. And so that helps me focus on where I should send specific stories to. Right? So demystifying the needs of broadcast reporters. Obviously, B-roll is the king. It can turn a non-story into lead on a 5 p.m. broadcast the next day if you can get footage to them quick enough. Understand that reporters are dealing with an ethical dilemma in terms of taking footage from you. I encounter a lot of producers that tell me they don't ever take B-roll. And that is emphatically not true, or they have no idea what their reporters are doing because reporters love B-roll. If they can put together their package quicker and get out right after they go on air, they're happy to do it. So take advantage of that. Make those connections and give reporters B-roll any chance you get. Think critically about the footage that you could give a reporter. And also, I would say think critically about what they don't need. There's no reason to load them down with a ton of footage. Most likely they're doing a 30-second package, maybe a minute package. So if you're giving them more than a couple minutes, and even that is stretching it, in my opinion, you're giving them too much stuff to work with. You've made it a little bit harder, possibly. And then, of course, taped interviews can work. I really try to discourage sending out taped interviews. It's a tough hill to climb, mainly, especially these days, because there's no reason not to set up a quick Zoom call. That's just the nature of the game right now. And of course, good journalists will always want to do the interviews themselves. All right, next slide. We'll move on to Zoom. So speaking that kind of, there's no reason not to set up a Zoom interview these days. This is huge. It's been game changing. And I think we tripled our expert interviews because of Zoom in the last year. And the reason that I think this happened was I liken it to sort of the advent of MP3s and Napster, and suddenly everybody had access to music free, quickly. And something similar is happening with Zoom and video in the sense that the speed and the access has completely trumped fidelity. Now, we may go back to sort of the in-studio interviews and the satellite interviews that we had been doing, but certainly not at the same rate. I think we'll see VIPs kind of go back to the studio, but I think for most experts, I think for the long haul, we're going to be looking at Zoom. Let's see here. So yeah, Zoom's definitely not going away. We've discovered that numerous experts weren't aware, and we weren't aware of, and we continue to build key relationships with reporters and producers through the quick response. So kind of using Zoom as a tool and responding quickly, turning around in a couple hours has become a tremendous boon for us. All right, we can go on to the next slide. All right, so I know you're thinking, I'm not a photojournalist, I'm not a videographer. You don't have to be. Like I mentioned earlier, it's quite possible you have a really great camera in your pocket right now. You know, it's even possible you could send raw, unedited footage that's poorly color corrected or not color corrected. That's fine. You don't have to worry about that. At the end of the day, most broadcast journalists are just looking for the visual, and they're not going to critique your work. They need the shot of whatever they're talking about. So keep in mind though, but your goal, and I think this will help you in the long run, is again, paying attention to the aesthetics of each station and doing your best to kind of mimic their look. So in the perfect scenario, we get a story on the news, and what I love is when somebody asks me, was that us or was that them? And that tells me that I've done my job. If no one knows where the video came from, then that's perfect. All right, we can go on to the next slide. So a couple tips on how to shoot like a photojournalist. This is just my personal philosophy. I spent a couple years working with the late documentary filmmaker Albert Maysles, and the way he captured people, he focused his camera and his lens with a great deal of empathy in mind. And I believe very much in that same sort of process. I like to get to know my subjects. I like to make them comfortable. You know, it just makes shooting, especially B-roll, much easier, because you're going to need people to do things. You're going to need people to walk you through processes, to show off physical objects. So the more you can talk to people, the more you can understand what they do day to day, and be empathetic to the fact that most times you're going to be dealing with people who aren't comfortable being in front of a camera. So certainly keep in mind empathy more than anything else when you're dealing with subjects. Make sure to shoot a variety of shots. So obviously you want close up, you want medium, you want wide, and of course B-roll. So definitely shoot a variety of things. And the idea behind this is you want to give the photojournalist an ability to edit a package just from the shots that you're sending them. So they can kind of pick and choose what they want. They're pretty much always going to want to start with a wide, and they're going to want to move in closer as they read their copy. And if you can, I would say shoot full sequences. And by sequences, I mean, you know, if you're in a laboratory setting, you may have someone going through a scientific process, and you know it may begin with test tubes and things of that nature, and using some sort of equipment. Show the whole thing. You know, it may take you a bit to shoot everything, but make sure you have a full sequence that begins like with a wide shot and then follows them all the way through, and try to cut that down, you know, into, you know, 10, 20, 30 seconds at most. Shoot handheld. This is what I find is kind of the easiest thing and saves you a ton of time. Most of these shoots you can do very quickly because you just got to pick up a camera and turn it on. If you got a fairly steady hand, you'll be fine. If you watch your local news, you'll see that most B-roll is going to be handheld. It might start with a tripod. You might see wide shots. You might see buildings that are more static, or that are shot on a tripod, but pretty much everything else is going to be handheld or shoulder mounted. And so a dirty secret here is that I never ask credit. I don't ask credit for the university. I don't ask credit for myself. I don't ask credit for anybody who's shot the footage if it's been given to me. Now, if they want to credit the university or they want to credit someone, that's absolutely fine. But it's not something I encourage. I feel it's just kind of a bit of a barrier to entry, and I want to break down all those walls that I can. Okay, next slide. So you've got all this footage, you've shot this stuff, and now what do you do with it? How do you present it to a photojournalist? So I would say you aim for at least 30 seconds of a sequence that plays nicely together. And I do this because a lot of times I'll edit a 30-second sequence and knowing that they just may run it beginning to end while they're reading copy on the air. Now, if there's you suspect that they might be doing a bigger package that's longer than 30 seconds, I would also encourage you to send out selects or just fragments, so shot by shot, so each video. So you could send both a package sequence and also, a dozen shots, and they can do whatever they want with it. I would say each shot should only last a few seconds. And then, sequences, again, should be no longer than 10, 15 seconds each. Complete packages, if you put something together as a complete package, that can work. I think it works best as B-roll for them. So it's possible, but you're kind of fighting an uphill battle, in my opinion, on that. Also, you want to be aware to avoid branding. So if you've done a complete package and you've got burned in logos or lower thirds, that's not going to work for them. They want to avoid that. They'll play stuff off Twitter. They might put a Twitter logo on something if you got something on there. But if you send them a finished video, they're really not going to want to run that. As far as sequences versus shots, kind of what I mentioned before, why not send both? You say, here's a sequence or two, here's all the shots that I made with it, here's some extra shots, feel free to do what you want. Giving them the most amount of room to work with, I think, is best, but you also don't want to overwhelm them. So that kind of goes back to the whole, if you send them anything, be prepared they're going to put it on TV. So choose your shots wisely, literally. And again, like, no overt branding. I like to put in our UGA logos wherever I can, but don't cover the scene in branding at all, because that is probably going to get tossed out immediately. So if you can, have somebody wearing the logos, but beyond that, unless it's environmental, I would say avoid it. And again, yeah, never send any footage that you don't want to be aired. All right, next slide. Okay, so when pitching the video, the biggest thing is don't undersell your footage. Offer it exclusive, offer it embargo. What I generally do is I go to the biggest station in our market and I say, hey, I've got this footage. I'll give it to you first, or I'll give it to you exclusively if you can guarantee, you're going to run this story and you're going to run it 6 or 10 times. And if they come back and they say yes, then they're my focus until we get to air. And once they air it, then I can go to the other stations and say, here's the stuff I got, chop it up however you like. Now, if the biggest station goes, yeah, okay, cool, whatever, they just take the footage, then day one, when I pitch, I'm pitching everybody at the same time. But keep in mind, you've got some leverage to work with. You've got a new asset that could be an exclusive. It could be something you can use under embargo. So when you can, you also, with the footage, you want to provide an expert. And I think ideally, and for some of us who work in academia, it's tough, but if you can, on top of that, try to provide a third-party source. So if you have an expert and a third-party source, let's say the expert is doing research, and you get the expert and you get the third-party source. The third-party source would be a subject, maybe, that has been involved in the research. So if you could put those pieces together, that makes it even more engaging for the journalists. Brevity is going to be key when you're writing your pitch. Generally what I do is maybe I'll give 2-3 sentences about the story. I'll send a link to the story or attach it. But my pitch is mostly multimedia. So it is going to be the written copy. So if they wanted to do a 30-second, just quick reader on the air, here's the 30-second copy you could read for the story, edit however you like. And then I'll have links to Dropbox where we store our videos. So they could download them right that moment. And everything is organized in Dropbox, kind of in their language. So, I'll have a folder that specifically says B-roll. I'll have a folder that specifically says interviews. I'll have a folder that specifically says news copy. And again, one of the things I like to do, especially if there are presentations or things like commencement where we have speakers, I like to take a sentence or two out of the videos and use that as my link. So they don't even have to click on the video. They can read the quote and know that there's video of that. And again, soft pitch this stuff. Anytime you're engaging with a journalist, let them know that you're available to shoot video, that you can kind of make these stories happen for them, and that you're at their disposal. And so this kind of will give you an idea of what the video footage looks like that we've been able to get on air. I would say about 90% of this video was shot in-house. All right.
Moon on display at UGA from the Apollo 11 and Apollo 17 lunar mission.
The rocks, along with the Georgia state flag that once went to the moon, were given to the Georgia Capitol by former President Nixon.
Attendees were able to watch archival footage related to the moon landing and tour the new Moon Rocks exhibit in the Russell Central Gallery.
Now, the University of Georgia is joining the space race, a group of students heading to Virginia to launch Georgia's first satellite. It's going down tonight.
After 4 years of hard work, NASA is taking their satellite to space on a rocket Thursday night.
The satellite is about the size of a shoebox, and for the next 2 years, it'll use a powerful camera to study the health of our coast.
Students across the country return to college campuses.
Just readjusting, trying to feel normal.
There's more on their minds than declaring a major.
It doesn't feel like school. It doesn't feel real.
This is definitely not how I imagined me coming back on campus was going to be.
But UGA is holding some in-person classes, with professors teaching behind plexiglass and in space seating auditoriums.
COVID-19 testing is available to people with and without symptoms. The testing is happening at Legion Pool. While it is free, you have to make an appointment.
The University of Georgia is producing face shields through their College of Engineering and the Instrument Design and Fabrication Shop.
And the colleges of engineering and instrument design are using 3D printing to make face shields for local hospitals.
Scientists are taking steps to bring peace of mind closer to home.
There you go.
It's a non-invasive COVID-19 test swab.
It's a very easy process overall in terms of going to get tested and then getting a vial, spinning the vial, and then they do the rest, and then they just email you.
The test is free and only available to students and staff.
Tonight, the University of Georgia announced today it is changing graduation plans in light of the governor's new order. Graduates will now be able to sit on the field at Sanford Stadium instead of in the stands with their families. They are also allowed unlimited guests for the ceremony. The whole stadium will be open to encourage social distancing, but it's not required. Mask also not required, but they are strongly encouraged.
UGA alumna Maria Taylor gave the commencement address. The ESPN star graduated from Grady College of Journalism in 2009 and got her Master of Business Administration from UGA in 2013. In her speech, Taylor encouraged graduates to focus on their legacy. Last night's graduation ceremony was the first of 3.
Graduation weekend at UGA, you're looking at video from the first of 3 undergraduate commencement ceremonies at Sanford Stadium last night. More than 7,500 undergraduate and graduate students are receiving their degrees. Big congratulations to all of them.
Okay, so like I said, almost all that footage was actually shot by us, short of a couple man on the street interviews that you saw in the CNN clip. So just to give you an idea of the range of quality that we're dealing with here, the very first clip you saw that featured the moon rocks was shot on my phone. I was, for some reason, not aware that that event was happening and found out about it the day of and ran down there to our library and just shot footage of these moon rocks. And to be perfectly honest, they're just specks. As you can see, you know, there's a magnifying glass there. So, but I knew it was like interesting and visual, and we're around the anniversary of the lunar landing. So newsrooms are looking for stuff like this. So I was able to just go down there and shoot quick footage and send it off. And I think we got on at least half a dozen stations that afternoon. So it went from 10 in the morning to just learning about the story to being on the lead 5 o'clock news in a bunch of the state. And then the other sort of middle section here, what I would refer to as high quality, is really, you've got a professional camera, but you're just shooting it handheld. You've just, you know, you've got your white balance set, but otherwise it's pretty raw. So you could shoot this in 1080p, you could shoot this in 4K, you know, pretty much any format is fine. But you don't have to worry too much. As long as your colors are good, your white balance, you're absolutely fine. Again, mostly handheld is what you're dealing with. And as far as the professional stuff, so this kind of footage is the footage that's shot by our video team. And this, I would say, is actually the trickiest to work with, because I think a lot of news producers would feel that it's overproduced. That it looks more marketing based, and they're not wrong from their point of view. I try to pitch out this kind of footage as much as I can, but it works best when we're dealing with a feature story, something that's 2 or 3 minutes longer, or maybe it's exclusive footage, you know, to a certain lab or space that you can't give access to. But it is a bit of an uphill battle in terms of that, in terms of using footage that's slow-mo, that's really, really crisp. It's just not going to blend in well with the news, and they're going to want to veer away from that just a little bit. All right, next slide. So to give you an idea of the success, we really kind of started pushing this in 2020, fiscal year 2020. And that year we had about 4.8 million viewers total. Mind you, this is just for the handout footage news stories. So it doesn't include, you know, our normal day-to-day news hits. And then this year it bumped up to 6.5 million. So that tells me that there is a tremendous need in broadcast newsrooms for video footage, or at the least that they're willing to take on our footage. And to give you an idea of about how many stories I pitch this method, it's generally about 14 a year. But I'm looking forward, and I really want to do at least 1, ideally 2 stories every month. And I think that's doable. All right, next slide. So what you can achieve with minimal effort is just increase odds of your story going to air. You're closing that distance gap. You're controlling the visual narrative. You've created media that you know you could possibly use in the future. And I would definitely encourage you to archive everything you shoot. Don't depend on news agencies going back and getting footage you set them before. Sometimes that happens, but it's rare. And I would encourage you to keep it on hand. So if a similar story pops up, a similar expert that you've got B-roll pops up, you have quick access to it. So when they're called upon to do an interview, you can say, hey, I've got this B-roll ready for you. You've also created media that you can use for other channels. Like we mentioned before, it could go for social media marketing purposes. You can find ways to leverage it in other spaces. And of course, you've generated positive brand exposure. And the biggest thing is, in my opinion, you've created positive working relationships with journalists. They know that they can depend on you. They know that you speak their language, you know, both literally and visually. That's the biggest takeaway, I think, from this is really developing that relationship and becoming a tool for the news stations that are near you. And with that, we can start going through questions. Let's see here. So the question about, do we ever provide interviews, video interviews when pitching? Just to give an idea of sort of on-screen presence. I actually do that. I actually keep an archive of pretty much every story we air. And from time to time when I'm pitching an expert, I will say, you know, hey, they appeared on this channel, you know, on a similar topic. Here's how they are. It's pretty rare though. I'm not often asked that. Usually most of the folks I'm dealing with, I will let them know it's like this person's camera ready or this person may need a little encouragement. I have a good enough relationship with most reporters and kind of give them a heads up and let them know kind of what they're in for. Either, the person's gung-ho and ready or the person's a little nervous. And I think that makes it better for everybody, both the reporter and the interviewee. Let's see, second question. So dealing with refresh issues on monitors, that is just something I haven't encountered recently with modern cameras. We use DSLR cameras at this point. So it's not something I haven't had any sync issues as of late. I would assume that we shot that and the computer had a good enough refresh rate that it didn't cause an issue. Let's see, where do you archive everything you shoot? So I don't archive everything I shoot. I archive everything I send to the media. So at the end of the day, we're only talking about a couple minutes of video. We do have a DAM system that we use. We also use Dropbox. So we've got a tremendous amount of storage that I can leverage. I'm finding that it's maybe 500 gigabytes to a terabyte a year. It's really not too much. Let's see. How many folks do you have on your video team? So most of what you've seen today was shot by me, but we also have a video team. I think there's 4 people on it. Let's see, what DAM do you use? That I cannot say. I want to say it's Widen, but Rick O'Quinn, who works at UGA's Marketing Communications, is our go-to guru on all things DAM. When it comes to providing photo credits, yeah, so photo credits, we do generally ask for credit, and we ask that they credit the shooter as well. Whether it's local, national. Yeah, Brandon's on the line. All right, I think that's all the questions so far. If anybody's got more, I'm happy to answer.
Just one thing Brandon just put in, and just so in case people aren't looking at the chat function, yes, it is Widen Collective that we are using.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we also use that for our photography.
I had a question. We talked about tape interviews versus Zoom interviews. So what do you mean don't use taped interviews versus Zoom?
So by taped interviews, let's say I go into our studio and I interview one of our faculty experts. That's great. It would be a tough sell to a reporter in this day and age, since Zoom is such a big deal. And Zoom is so instantaneous. So my opinion, it's just easier just to set them up on a Zoom call.
And, to make them available for Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
I got it. Okay, great.
Yep. All right. Does anybody have anything else? I think it was a lot of information in a very short period of time. I appreciate everybody bearing with me while I sped through that slide deck.
2 things. One, a question. I'm sorry I had to step out for a minute. Did you mention the CASE award for? I
did not. I'll leave that to you.
Christopher shared footage of the satellite launch, which was a really big deal here. Great, both research story and experiential learning story for us. And the story did just win an international award from the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education. And it was very highly regarded by the judges, and they really classified it as, to use the phrase, a show don't tell moment, where we really just demonstrated it. And a lot of the footage, both the actual footage of the students was Christopher was a part of. He also collected a lot of those clips that would actually was from the media coverage that actually was the opening of that video. There was one other thing I was going to mention, but now I cannot think of it.
Let's see, we got another question here.
Okay.
Do you ever use content shot by other people at the university? Yes, absolutely. As you may have heard, we have a football program. So from time to time, I'll get questions on, what is the turf grass that UGA plays on, or why do they play between the hedges? And so I will defer to athletics for their video. And so I have a good working relationship with them, and they have an archive of B-roll that I can lean on. So that's kind of a good example. I also encourage communicators that are in our individual schools and units to shoot video whenever they can. If they've got an expert or someone who's working in the field, I absolutely encourage them to shoot any video and send it my way if they're writing a story on them. So technical specifications. Yeah, so really, at the least, 720p footage is fine. So it doesn't need to be high quality footage. More and more I am sending out 4K footage, but I'm always encoding into MP4. So still small file sizes, still fairly low quality. At the end of the day, again, it's about speed. So I want journals to be able to download stuff in minutes. So it's really kind of up to you to determine, how far you kind of want to push that. But I would say to try to keep your files, reasonable. You don't want your files to be any more than a couple hundred megabytes.
The other thing I just remembered, which was to point out contextually that when you went out and shot that footage of the moon rocks, one of the reasons you weren't informed about it was that I was on my way to the huddle in South Bend because as Christopher knows, I am a space geek and would have been all over that, but unfortunately there was some kind of a miscommunication. But we did get a lot of pickup on that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, did you mention you mentioned the physical distance, like our closest TV stations are 70 miles away. So it's very, very hard, and particularly during the pandemic, to get people to come out there remotely.
Yeah, and I think it's actually getting a little bit more difficult as the state's population continues to go and traffic gets worse. So anything we could do to close the gap between us and any station in the state, I'm looking to do.
And that's one of the things that is one of our priorities going forward. Christopher's done a phenomenal job working directly with the Atlanta market, including the bureaus of the national networks, and we're now starting to focus even more heavily on. Georgia has, I guess, one way or another, about 12 or so broadcast markets outside of Atlanta, and they don't have the reach. But Athens, where we're located, there are no TV stations, but Augusta, where Kristen and Ray Sean have multiple outlets. I'm seeing other people on the call, like folks from Georgia Southern, where there actually are some bureaus. I think there's still bureaus down there, but working out of Savannah. And that's one of the challenges that Christopher has had to overcome, and we're continuing to work on that. Anything else? Okay.
That's it.
Anything you'd like to add, Andrea?
No, there we go. So no, I think I think Christopher covered it. It's always interesting to hear, and always kind of like reassuring and inspiring to get that message of anybody can go out and take their iPhone and do this.
Yeah, it's not that hard, and a lot of this is I think kind of information that's fairly obvious and intuitive. It's just you don't think about it. That hey, I could do that, and you can.
Yeah.
So are you the only one in the department who shoots video?
No. So
Okay.
we do have a video team as well. So they mostly handle marketing videos. So a lot of the professional, like what I was calling the professional footage,
Right.
that's the kind of stuff that they produce. We are integrated with them now. So we are working hand in hand. At this point, I'm trying to shoot less and focus more of my time on pitching. And I'm working with that video team specifically now to kind of give them assignments and say, hey, we're working on this story. Can you guys go out and get this footage for me? So that's an evolving process.
You should point out, Christopher, too, that part of that is they will do packaged, professionally edited videos, but they'll also give you the raw footage that you can edit from, so that people understand exactly how that works. So you get the footage that doesn't have the lower thirds and some of the other
exactly
the other effects.
Yeah. When I in giving them an assignment, let's say, I will also give them a directive of like, I want these shots. Oh, got a cat. I want these shots, give me a sequence, give me these B-roll shots. Don't give me any more than 2 minutes, so they'll have a full directive of me of what I'm looking for. So essentially I'm playing the role of producer in that scenario.
And as you can tell everyone, it's working very, very well. Christopher does an outstanding job for us, and we're very, very happy with the results. And again, I think the most important thing is it's stuff that a lot of people could do as long as they can carve out the time for it. And as long as they don't get distracted too much by cats. Yeah. So anyway, Christopher, Andrea, thank you both. It's so great to, Christopher, I work with you every day, but Andrea, it's so great to work with you again. Two of my favorite people in the world that I've had the privilege of working with. And I know, Andrea, we've already communicated about you joining us for the 2:30.
Yes, I'll be there.
Hopefully Betty and Asherman can be there so that I can see the kids again. And then anybody else who wants to, I sent out my email address. So if anybody else wants to join us for that, please let us know. Brandon and I will probably be sending out the invite sometime within the next half hour. We're ending a little early, which is great. Gives people a chance to go grab some lunch if you're on the East Coast, or breakfast if you're on the West Coast. And we will reconvene at 12:30. So thanks again, everybody. Thank you again, Christopher. Thank you, Andrew. That was a really, really good presentation. Take care, everybody. We'll see you in a little while.